Sorry, I was having Wi-Fi issues.
It is 6:30.
Yes, so are we ready to go?
Just one moment. I believe we're good to go now. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I will call us to order and ask everybody to unmute so that we can check in. Okay, I will start with Councillor Baxter.
Here.
Councillor Parkinson.
I'm here as well.
Councillor Jansen.
Ready to go.
Mayor Martin.
Present.
Councillor Kobayashi.
Here.
Councillor Logan.
I'm here too.
Excellent. We are all here. So next item of business is to, are there any changes to the agenda? Not seeing any. I will look to adopt the agenda as presented under unanimous consent, including the near term, the long term, and the committee of the whole agenda. Is anyone opposed to the adoption of those three? Not seeing any, so that is carried by consent. And adoption of the minutes from June 7th.
Chair,
Yes.
the territorial acknowledgement.
Oh, my apologies. So much technical details tonight. I've been trying to get in since 6. Sorry. Yes, we acknowledge that we are meeting here on the shared traditional lands of the Coast Salish people, where we're all so lucky to live, work, and play. Thank you. Next up, I believe we have no public participation. Is that still correct?
We do not have any public participation, and we have not received any written submissions for tonight's meeting.
Great, thank you so much. And for the minutes, I was away, so I don't know if anyone might have any input on the minutes. Any amendments? I'm not seeing any, so those will be carried by unanimous consent as well. So we are moving on then to new business. And we have Jill Collinson on the status of the checkout bag regulation bylaw number 1757 from 2019.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Ian Burhill here. The senior planner has left me to assist with this item, and she's given me some notes that I'll speak to now.
Excellent.
So earlier this spring, Council directed staff to offer a briefing on where the city left off with our checkout bag bylaw. Work on this bylaw started in 2018, and in February 2019, the bylaw received first and second readings. Since that time, provincial and federal regulatory guidance surrounding single-use plastics, including checkout bags, has been evolving. In 2019, a legal challenge redirected the bylaw process to require provincial sign-off prior to municipal adoption of these types of bylaws. In 2019, a legal challenge redirected the bylaw process to require provincial sign-off prior to municipal adoption. Later that year, the province introduced the Plastic Action Plan and is presently working towards granting authority to municipalities to regulate single-use plastics without their approval. Concurrently, the province is also working to develop a legal framework to allow for a province-wide ban. Similarly, in the fall of 2020, the federal government announced plans to ban single-use plastics, and just last month amended legislation to categorize plastics as toxic. Later this year, it is anticipated that the provincial government will grant municipalities the authority to regulate certain single-use plastics without the ministerial approval. Once this occurs, staff will bring forth a bylaw with the option to proceed or not. That concludes my introduction. Thank you. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Borhill. Any questions for Mr. Borhill? I have just one question, and that is in regards to alternatives. Has the province given any direction that perhaps Ms. Collinson may have passed on to you about what alternatives might be available or recommended instead of single-use plastic items? Because I do know that they are very convenient, and many of our small businesses still do rely on things like plastic bags for takeout and plastic containers for takeout.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. We have not conversed on the issue of alternative materials. However, staff would be happy to provide that information as part of our return to council once the province brings forth its change in policy, or at any time council asks us to bring that forward.
Great, thank you very much. I think it would be very helpful to local businesses to have some ideas about what might be a good alternative and one that's supported by both the province and this council. Thank you. Okay, moving on, our next item is...
I see 3 hands, Madam Chair,
Oh.
FYI.
Sorry, my apologies. Councillor Parkinson, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just wondering whether before we are telling everybody else what to do, we should have a look at the city operations and what we're doing in the way of using plastic bags, and could we improve upon current standards? The thought occurred to me as I was walking along the lagoon and watching public works crews collecting all the garbage bags down there. Obviously a good thing to do. If we don't use garbage bags in the containers, there's probably some real issues with heavy containers and stinky containers, but it seems to me that we should look at our own house at least a little bit before we go after everybody else in town. So I wonder if perhaps staff could have a quick look at that before they come back in the fall with this item.
Thank you. Councillor Jansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, Mr. Borhill, if our bylaw is going to speak to the other items. I see that some communities have chosen to regulate, including plastic straws and the foam serving containers.
Mr. Borhill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. To answer Councillor Jansen's question, staff would be happy to look at options in terms of expanding the scope of the bylaw to include those other items. I think thinking's probably evolved as has the regulation at the upper levels of government. So we could certainly look at those other items if council wanted us to expand the scope of the existing bylaw.
I'd rather see us do it once than have to come back half a dozen times. And further to that, I love the thoughts about having a clear understanding for us on what impact this is going to have on some of our small business entrepreneurs. And I'd hate to think that we had taken some steps without consultation with some of them. I know costs are important, and I do know that there are all sorts of alternatives being developed and that are available, including things made out of corn and what have you, and the bamboo, recycled bamboo utensils and stuff. So I am sure there's an option available, but consultation and education for our business community, I think, is important as well. I'm sure Doug will have something to say about that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Jansen. Councillor Kobayashi?
Thank you very much, Chair Day. Just through you to Ian, a question directly to you, Ian. Are we already given heads up to all the small businesses that this is potentially going to happen, so they can sort of start going, reducing their stockpile of plastic bags if they're using them right now? So I'm just wondering, because I certainly talked to a business and I said that, it hasn't been approved or anything, but, it's coming, and they went, whoa, thanks for the heads up. So I guess I answered my own question, but, is there been, or do we plan a communication to our small businesses within the city?
Through the chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor Kobayashi. Given that it's been 2 years since this issue was before council, it would be prudent to consider appropriate consultation with affected parties. We're in a holding pattern right now with respect to waiting to see what the province is going to do. We expect them to give us the ability to proceed with the bylaw or an amended bylaw without ministerial approval. And I think it absolutely would be in our best interest to consult with the affected parties when we come back with that. So that would be a component of the staff report that would accompany the bylaw when it returns to council, with options for council to comment on in terms of that feedback that we receive.
Okay, thanks so much, Ian.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands, I believe that we are finished our status update, and we will move on to item 5.2 with the CD28 Area 5 amendment for Latoria South. I believe Mr. Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just give me a second here to set up So this is a application to amend Area 5 in the CD28 zone. Currently, the Area 4, as you can see on this illustration, permits a range of care facilities. The CRD is proposing to expand the site by approximately 1 acre. The result that will be that the site will extend into Area 5, as shown on the illustration. And the zoning in Area 5, which currently does not permit the same range of uses as care facility, would be amended to include the same uses that is currently in Area 4 regarding care facilities. As a bit of a brief background, when the CD28 zone was adopted by council as part of the implementation of the Latoria South sub-area plan, it did include specific uses in Area 4 regarding height and the uses that would permit a care facility. Subsequently, in February 21, the CD28 zone in Area 4 was further amended to exclude care facilities from the limit of 40,000 square meters of non-residential floor area. This slide just gives a bit of an illustration of the comparison between the current Area 4 zoning regulations and how they would be transferred to the Area 5 zoning regulations. I should point out that the current uses and regulations in Area 5 would remain. So these would be in addition to the current uses and regulations. Currently, normally a development that would be submitted in Latoria South would require a development permit, but under the provisions of the Local Government Act, institutional uses such as the CRD care facilities are not subject to a development permit. And accordingly, staff are recommending that a Section 219 covenant apply that would require the CRD care facility to comply with the Latoria South design guidelines. As a bit of additional context, as you can see, this is the Latoria South sub-area plan. Area 4 and 5 are shown. Area 5 was described in the Latoria South area plan as a continuation of service, commercial, and institutional uses in the commons. So expanding the uses in Area 5, in staff's opinion, would still be in compliance with the provisions of the sub-area plan. Finally, in terms of staff recommendation, you can see that before you, which is that Area 5 be amended to include the specific uses, congregate housing, healthcare facility and treatment center, and nursing home, which are identical to what's currently in Area 4. The same provisions in terms of being excluded from the 40,000 square meters of non-residential would also be extended. And staff are also recommending the Section 219 covenant regarding the design guidelines. Staff in the staff report, there is a provision in there that the committee should decide to recommend to council that this Section 219 covenant not be included as part of the recommendation. That concludes the staff presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions for Mr. Carlson? Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few questions. I'm just wondering how large is this facility? How many beds are we thinking of we're going to be having there? And explain the tax status of a facility like this too, if you could.
Through the chair, I believe Mr. Henderson is available to answer the questions regarding the size of the facility, so I would defer to him. In terms of the tax status, I believe Jen Hepting is also here and would be better equipped to answer that question than I would. So if Mr. Henderson wants to...
Mr. Henderson, are you there?
Good evening, Chair. Yes, thank you for the opportunity through the Chair to answer the question. We're anticipating the facility will be over 300 beds. Probably in the 320 range is being considered at this time. It is subject to some approvals through the province on the capital. So the final size has not yet been determined.
Okay, that's close enough for me. Thank you.
And Ms. Hepting, are you available to answer the tax question?
Absolutely. And I will preface this by saying that I will follow up to confirm my comments when this matter reaches council. If this is provincially owned, there will be an exemption. And if not, it will be subject to taxation. And I believe it will fall under Class 6. But like I said, I will confirm both of those comments that I just made.
I thought it was a CRD building. Wouldn't that mean CRD owned it?
If there is no provincial ownership involved, then it will be subject to taxation. And I will confirm the class that it will be subject to. I believe it will be 6.
Thank you. Mr. Henderson, perhaps you could educate me on what you've done on other similar sites, whether you've asked for tax exemptions or whether you guys pay typical taxes.
Mr. Henderson?
Yes, sorry, through the Chair. Thank you. The CRD is exempt on taxes. So we do not anticipate we would be paying taxes on this building.
Okay. And I'm not sure if this is you, Mr. Henderson, or Dennis, or who should answer this, but I'm a little confused about the parking. In Mr. Mycroft's letter, he talks about 200 parking spaces, primarily underground, and we see I think the zoning calls for 1 for every 3 beds, and perhaps looking for some relief even from that. What should we expect for parking for this facility?
Through the chair, perhaps I can respond to that. The CRD has indicated, and I believe it's noted in the staff report, that they are interested in pursuing an alternative parking standard through the city's consideration of the parking bylaw, but currently they would be subject to the 1 per 3 beds, but they have requested an alternative parking standard, but that's yet to be confirmed through the process.
So Mr. Mycroft was just mistaken in his suggestion that there was 200 stalls to be built.
I can't speak for Mr. Mycroft, but I think what he's anticipating is that that would be the parking that they would hope to provide with a parking standard that reflects that.
Can you shed some light on this, Mr. Henderson?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. Through the chair, there is a draft parking bylaw that exists currently. Under the current standards, this would fall under the hospital class, and it'd be one stall for every 3 beds. So that'd be a little over 100 stalls. We've read the draft parking bylaw that Mr. Borhill has prepared, and that current bylaw would require about 170 stalls, 180 stalls if our building designs were to progress as anticipated. That's a process that's developing, and I'll refer to Mr. Borhill. He may want to have shed some comment on that.
Through the chair, if I could add to Mr. Henderson's response, staff will be undertaking consultation with the community and development stakeholders with the draft parking bylaw and policy as directed by council over the next couple months. We've already received feedback from the CRD, and I met with Mr. Henderson just last week. So he is correct in terms of his assessment of what the proposed parking requirement would be based on the plans. Where we're looking at potential recommended changes to the bylaw would be addressing mobility, the requirements for mobility scooter parking, as well as the definition of the use of the building. Right now we're looking at a very specific use such that the needs of this specific facility are appropriately addressed in the parking bylaw. As I said, we hope to come back to council after our current period of public consultation in August with those proposed amendments.
Thank you.
If I could, sorry, Chair, I'll just one follow up. And that's my, I guess my concern about extending the zoning to all of Area 5. It seems to me that the logical approach to me, if the building is a little larger than was originally thought, would be to adjust the boundary of Area 4 so that it covers what's required for this facility and has the appropriate zoning and everything in place. Short of that, I suppose another option would be to take a sort of 5A area and give it the zoning that Area 4 has. I'm not sure why that would be beneficial or what it would be, but the thought of just extending the zoning over all of Area 6 seems to be introducing an additional zone to Royal Bay that council may or may not be interested in. Myself, I think I would support the idea of just limiting the zoning that's required for this building to the area that the building's going to use. So I wonder why that approach wasn't taken instead of the let's just rezone all of Area 5 to allow for this and perhaps similar facilities in the future.
Through the chair, perhaps I can answer Councillor Parkinson's question. There were a number of options that we explored with Gablecraft in terms of how to achieve the outcome that they were after. Moving the Area 5, Area 4 boundary unfortunately would have meant an amendment to the sub-area plan, which would have translated into official community plan amendment, which obviously would be a more extensive process. The thinking from staff was that by simply replicating those uses and regulations in Area 5, it achieved the same end without necessitating an amendment to the OCP.
Okay, to me, it opens up options that weren't considered as part of the zoning, and then perhaps are beyond what would be appropriate. So I'm going to let my other councillors talk about this, but I guess I'm not yet convinced it's the right approach. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and great discussion. I'll refrain from some of my comments on parking, and I think that's a matter maybe for another day, because I've been down to the summit to try and find a parking spot, and it can be challenging. So I'll reserve comments on that. Now, I concur with some of Councillor Parkinson's concerns. If the rest of Area 5 is going to be another VHA facility or CRD facility that doesn't pay taxes, I mean, not a whole lot coming back to the community in that regard, as opposed to something else that Gablecraft can put into the rest of Area 5. I'd be more in favor of extending Area 4 to satisfy the hospital, something of which I did vote in favor of and am still in favor of. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll reserve my comments about parking as well, but I just wanted a little bit of perspective because I think the summit or this new facility is going to be similar in size to the summit, and maybe Mr. Henderson can just give us some perspective on how many parking stalls are there, and then I'll reserve comment on the rest of my questions on parking.
To the chair, the Summit building has about, I think it's 84 parking stalls. That's about the same size as this one. And we are proposing, well, the new parking bylaw would be 170 stalls minimum. So it'd be from 84 to 170. And we're looking at probably doing upwards of a little bit more than that, actually, at this site. And
I'm sorry, a little more than what?
The 170 is in the current plans. But so the 170 is currently the Summit building about the same size as 84. The new parking bylaw requires us to, that Colwood is considering, we would require us to have a 170, 175, and we may do a little bit extra.
Great, thank you, Mr. Henderson. That actually gives me some comfort, so I appreciate that. That's awesome. Maybe through you, Madam Chair, to Dennis, in terms of process, which is simpler, going the route that you're suggesting, or expanding Area 4 that would encompass the additional acre? I guess I'm just looking at a process that simplifies things.
Through the chair to Councillor Logan, again, we'd be into the same issue if we extended the Area 4 boundary to encompass Area 5, which is, I assume, what you're asking. Then yes, we would be back into an OCP amendment, which is obviously a much more extensive process, which is why, as I said earlier in my comments, we did look at moving those boundaries along, and we came to the conclusion that by simply transporting the zoning over into Area 5, it accomplished the same thing without an OCP amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Mayor Martin, followed by Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm staying along the same discussion points that we've just been talking about. I'm still struggling to understand this final acre, and how do we provide the proper zoning for this final acre without providing the zoning on the other lands? And I'm struggling to understand why we need to do an OCP amendment if we're talking about a whole zone. But what we're looking at, what's proposed by staff today, is just an amendment to Area 5, Latoria South, which doesn't need an OCP. I'm struggling to understand the difference.
Through the chair to Mayor Martin, the critical element here is, for better or for worse, when the sub-area plan was adopted as part of the OCP, the boundaries between Area 4 and 5 were also included. So any movement of those lines or consolidation of those lines technically would require an amendment to the sub-area plan, which then translates into an amendment to the OCP. So what staff are trying to do here is not change those boundaries and simply change the zoning, which is a more straightforward process.
So through the chair, so we're talking about changing the zoning in Area 5. Do we have any ability to only change the zoning on that 1 acre, or does it have to be the entire zone without an OCP amendment?
Through the chair, it would apply to the entire zone because that Area 5 boundary is not bisected by another sub area. So it would be the entire area.
And so going to Councillor Parkinson's initial issue, there is no way that we can just zone that 1 acre for hospital without it being significantly harder, is what I'm hearing?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And when you say significantly harder, what does that mean?
Through the chair, it would mean we would have to do an OCP amendment to create a sub area, or alternatively extend area 4 to capture the 1 acre of area 5.
Sorry, sorry, it was a poor question on my behalf. I'm going to rephrase it. I guess I meant from a timing standpoint, how long would that take?
It would take longer because it would involve a OCP amendment. So instead of just a rezoning bylaw, it would also be an amendment to the OCP. The timing would not be significantly longer, but it would certainly be more involved.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Baxter.
Yeah, I'm confused on the answers we got on parking. At first, I heard that although 170 would be the current requirement, approximately, that the applicant was going to be coming back for a lower number. And then I heard that they were actually going to build a bigger number of parking spaces. Which is it?
Hello. The plan has always been to have at least 175 parking stalls at the new building. By comparison, the Summit building that was built in the city of Victoria of similar size has 85, and we're looking at doing at least 175. So it's basically doubling the number of parking spaces that you see at the Summit for this new building. That's where the new parking bylaw will be pushing us in that direction as well. So it's consistent with the draft parking bylaw that was discussed at a committee of the whole, I guess earlier this month and in the previous month. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much on that.
Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah, that makes it clear. And then I'm intrigued by the idea of sort of jobs versus taxes. I understand we currently believe that this property is not subject to municipal taxes, will not be, but it does have approximately 300 jobs. Is that right?
Yeah, and possibly more.
Okay.
300 or more. Yeah.
Could you describe sort of generally what level of jobs there are? I mean, obviously there's going to be managerial jobs, there's going to be cleaning staff, and there's going to be a lot of jobs in between. Can you give us any sort of sense of that?
I'm not an expert at seniors' homes. I do have family who's been in senior homes, and I believe there's a councillor who may know more than myself.
Yes,
can I pause on that one? Can I defer that question?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer that question since my my team within Island Health staffs the summit. If you'll so permit me.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So there is a range of occupations that work out of the summit, from RNs to care aides to dietitians to occupational therapists to housekeeping, you name it. They're all well-paying jobs at the summit, and yeah, I venture to say upwards of probably 300 people at any one time would be working on site.
Okay, thank you. Well, I would venture to say, I haven't studied it in detail, but I think that's probably the largest concentration and the largest per acre job creating development in all of Colwood, and probably average higher jobs than any of the others. So I'm pretty happy with that, and I think if we don't get the taxes we might have got elsewhere, we're likely to make a significant number of current Colwood residents or future Colwood residents very happy to be working close to such a good employer.
Thank you. Are you finished, Councillor Baxter?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of questions, and I do see that Councillor Parkinson, you have your hand up, but because you have spoken before, if you don't mind, I will jump in with a couple of questions and then I'll go to you. My first question is in regards to the sewer capacity in the area, and it's for whichever staff person feels most prepared to answer it. But in all of the reports that I have seen come forward, none of them have told us what to anticipate in terms of sewer capacity. So the original number of homes that were to be developed in the Royal Bay, Royal Beach area was 2,800. It has since tripled from that number at least. And I do not know how we are planning to provide the road or the sewer capacity for that. The sewer enhancement fees are paid by development to upgrade lines that are of insufficient size, but because this is a hospital with a different mechanism for paying its way, I don't believe there would be anything coming to the sewer enhancement fund from the hospital. So I'm just trying to understand how that will be taken care of.
Thank you very much for just getting the video on. Thank you. This is Brent Molnar speaking. I'm in with video on. That's it. This is it. I'm in with Dennis, and so I'm showing up on Dennis. There was a series of questions there. Thank you very much, Councillor Day, and I'll endeavor to go through them one at a time. But if I've forgotten any, please make sure to remind me, and I will go back to them. So firstly, starting with the zoning considerations for the Royal Bay South lands. When we overviewed the development agreement as well as the zoning consideration for Royal Bay South, we identified to council and committee the monitoring that would be undertaken by the developer. So the developer has continued with that end, and we've met with them and talked about flow monitoring equipment that'll give us a required year in advance notice for any enhancement and upgrades. As discussed when we were unveiling that plan, we are aware of an enhancement upgrade over the course of time with the development of the lands, and that upgrade is scheduled for Wishart Road, and the date of schedule is not yet confirmed. That's what the monitoring is about. But that was overviewed when we considered the Royal Bay South rezoning consideration at whole. Same as that, we were looking at the road network for the Royal Bay area, and that included the CRD use of the land and the zoning considerations that are in play before you tonight, with the exception of the inclusion of the extra area that we were speaking of tonight. So the whole initial consideration was included in that overt rezoning consideration. So the sanitary system is also something that council has provided a budget for in the budget cycle from 2020 to 2024. We presently have KWL, which is Kerwood Lydell, the engineering consulting firm, providing an overview and update of our master plan. That's coupling with our I&I investigation, which we undertook in 2020 and are still undertaking in 2021 for federal lands as they contribute to the city's lands so that we can bring forward a proposal. We expect by Q3 of this year, maybe at the edge of Q4, we'll be bringing that master plan update to council or committee for their consideration. In line with that, that'll tie into our I&I investigation, which will tie into our maintenance works. And we are already aware over the course of time of the development needs of Royal Bay South that there will be a capacity upgrade. That takes me to what I think may be the last question, which is who's going to pay for that capacity upgrade and when does it occur? So the capacity charges are levied the same rate that a DCC is. They're levied at the time of application for building permit, in the same way that road charges and all of those other factors are considered, school district acquisition and such. At present, there is no exemption for the CRD facility and buildings for any of the development cost charges. So they'd be paid by the developer at the time of building permit. Please let me know if I've forgotten any question, or I'd be happy to give a greater explanation for anything that I've just overviewed. And thank you very much.
Just a follow-up on that, for the development cost charges, it sounds like those won't be ready for some time. If the development proceeds before the development cost charge is ready, will they still be required to pay them?
Thank you very much. Yes, the development is always required to pay development cost charges of the rate of the day. So when you refer to the development cost charges, those are the program update that is being considered with bylaw 1836. It is anticipated that third reading will be back to council before the recess, and that we may be considering adoption of that bylaw prior to the end of 2021. However, whether we do or don't, the existing rates would apply. And if we did, then the new rates would apply. Unchanged with bylaw 1836, which is just road developments cost charges, are the sanitary charges, as well as CRD integrated water services charges, as well as school district charges. Those are not subject to amendment, and they are in place today, and the rates would be applied as they are today.
Thank you. Probably the best person to ask might be our CRD representative, or it may be Councillor Logan, I'm not sure. I'm just curious, for parking for the 300 people who are going to be working at this facility at any given time, what sort of allotment of parking do you make for your employees?
Do they like me to take a stat? We anticipate that a shift would be about 80 to 100. And then people would be arriving at different methods of transportation, and that there will be adequate parking to enable those, the shift change. There would be some congestion there, but we anticipate that there would be sufficient parking to accommodate that shift change. The residents, of course, do not, the residents in our facilities, not of course, the residents in our facilities are, it's a long-term care. They do not drive. They do not have vehicles. So the parking is really for any visitors and employees. And I'll defer to Councillor Logan if he wants to have a comment on that.
No, I think you summed it up really well. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I have some thoughts that I'd just like to share in regards to the OCP. And I think that it's very clear, at least to me, by looking at how to slice and dice this development in order to not have to amend the OCP. It's pretty apparent that the OCP requires an amendment for the development because it is not as we had envisioned it. And the community charter does lay out stricter guidelines for advertising and public participation for an OCP amendment so that people can have an opportunity to make comment on any planned amendments to the official community plan, because that is supposed to be our roadmap to the future. And I think it is unfortunate that we would be considering how to avoid amending the OCP when it's clear that, you know, our plan is not the way that we laid it out originally. And I think we should be upfront about that. And I am quite certain that the residents of Colwood are going to be supportive of a new long-term care facility in Royal Bay or anywhere else in Colwood for that matter. Because we all have elders in our family who are needing care, and people who work in those professions who would like to work close to home. But I think we should be straightforward about it and enlist their participation in our planning process so that people feel that they are involved and that they are heard. And with that, I will move on to Councillor Parkinson.
Well, Chair, it's almost like you were giving me a segue into what I had to say. So thank you very much. But no, everybody, it wasn't planned. But before I get into that, I just wanted to assure Mr. Henderson that, speaking for myself, and I think probably most of council, maybe all of council and a lot of our residents, pretty exciting to see this project coming to Colwood. I like this. I'm going to try and pronounce it, Hogwaic approach. I think I've read a little bit about something in Seattle being very similar and very helpful for people with dementia. So good on you. It's gonna be great. It's exciting, and I'm sorry that we're a little anal about the process, but that's just who we are. I think probably it's appropriate I should make a motion that, and apologies to Mr. Carlson, but I would like to make the motion that the boundary of Area 4 be adjusted to include the lands required for the CRD hospital project.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Does anyone wish to discuss the motion? Is everyone clear on the motion? Okay, it seems like everyone is clear on the motion, and I will, if there is no discussion on the motion, then I will call the question. Is anyone opposed to the motion?
Sorry, Madam Chair, can I interject for a moment?
Make a good reason.
Okay, I think it's important to clarify for committee that in staff's opinion, this does not, as it's presented to you tonight, does not require an amendment to the OCP. It is, as I pointed out in my presentation, it does comply with the sub-area plan in terms of the intent for Area 5. Secondly, I think it is worth noting that part of the reason that staff took this somewhat different route in terms of simply amending the zoning is that the Gablecraft and CRD have both indicated that there are some timing constraints, substantial timing constraints regarding this project. And I'm not sure if I'll take the role of the chair, whether we want to allow Mr. Henderson or Mr. Mycroft to speak to that. But those are the 2 points I wanted to bring to your attention.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't know that that is really germane to the question. The timing issue, while important to those, we are trying to honor our community and their wishes and get their input. I'm sorry, Mr. Henderson, we are at a motion here, so I would like to hear from council members on motion. Okay, I have Councillor Baxter.
I just wanted to confirm, to make sure I'm absolutely clear, that what Councillor Parkinson moved was the staff recommendation. Is that right?
No, I don't believe that is correct.
Okay.
Staff, could you read back the motion?
So the motion that Councillor Parkinson put forward was that the boundary of Area 4 be adjusted to include the CRD long-term care facility.
So Mr. Carlson, can you confirm, is that the same as the staff recommendation?
Your chair, no, it is not. That would, as I pointed out before, would require that the boundary between Area 4 and Area 5 be extended to include the 1 acre that is being proposed by the CRD.
So Councillor Baxter, are you clear now?
I am, and I'll be opposing the motion.
Okay, thank you. Next, I had Councillor Kobayashi.
Thank you, Chair. In light of this latest piece of information now, I mean, we're not getting the full picture here again. So I'm a bit concerned that we've called the question, and if this is in fact time sensitive, then I'd certainly like to understand exactly what that is. I mean, come on, guys, we can't make a decision when we know this other factor's been thrown at us. Now, it should have been thrown at us before. I acknowledge that, but I'm intrigued by this right now. So it's hard for me to support something that I don't have all the facts now. So we're going off half-cocked again. That's just my comment. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Henderson, would you like to tell us about your time-sensitive issue?
Thank you, Councillor Day. Thank you, Chair. We currently have a sale that is intending to close in November. In the sale, we've agreed to acquire 4 acres. And if we were initially trying to get the 5th acre rezoned by the end of this month. We've just recently extended that until October to enable the rezoning of the 5th acre to be completed so that we can acquire all 5 acres when the sale closes in November. There's an expectation of the landowner that they're going to receive the proceeds in November. If the rezoning does not progress as proposed tonight, we understand that there's a risk that it may not be completed by October, and then we would be forced to only acquire 4 acres. And then our building design would have to change. We would not be able to construct a building similar to the Hogwick design. And we would be designing a taller building with much reduced green space, much reduced open air around the building. It would compromise the whole design and the intent of what we're trying to accomplish by acquiring a 5 acre site. When we initially put the purchase, sale, and discussions together, I thought the whole thing was going to be zoned favorably for us, and then upon as it progressed, we understood that the 5th acre actually was not. So we added into the agreement an ability to complete this rezoning so that we would be able to progress with the building. So it's a very significant consequence to the entire vision and design and outcome that we're trying to achieve if we do not have the 5th acre rezoned by October. Okay. Fortunately, the landowner has recently provided us a couple more months, but they are intending to get their proceeds in November. So,
okay.
So the follow-on question is to Mr. Molnar, I guess, or to Mr. Carlson is, if we did go with this particular motion right now, then understanding the time constraints right now, is it possible? I guess that's the fundamental question to me right now. So do either of you want to tackle that question?
Through the chair, if committee or council ultimately directs that the OCP be amended, I would estimate that would be late fall, early winter before we would be through that process.
Okay. So, Councillor Parkinson, I am feeling that there may be some complications with the workability of your motion. Do you wish to continue, or shall I just test the House?
I made my motion after Mr. Carlson stated that the OCP amendment was a lot of work, but not an additional amount of time. So I'm a little concerned here. He's telling us it's a time constraint, but I guess I'm not hearing definitively that the OCP amendment is going to take it longer. And so I guess, the principle that this discussion started on was that the hospital zoning was very suitable for a hospital site, but to blanketly put it on a different site, which could have a bunch of unintended consequences, has really no value to the city. I don't see why we should go down that route at this point. So I guess I'm looking for, I need absolute clarity from Mr. Carlson that this OCP amendment is in fact going to take longer than just the rezoning process. I haven't heard that. I have heard the opposite. So I'll leave it to him to clarify things.
Through the chair to Councillor Parkinson. So our initial discussion with Gablecraft as part of this application was, as I mentioned, that the rezoning alone would be a somewhat shorter process than an OCP amendment. Should council direct that the area 4 boundary be changed, which, as I pointed out, is an OCP amendment, the timeline that I've mentioned would certainly extend, because staff would have to come back to committee with an amended report. We would then have to go through the bylaw process, not only to amend the zoning, but also to amend the sub-area plan and the OCP. So those would certainly take longer. And as I mentioned, I anticipate that would be late fall, early winter at best.
So Mr.
It sounds like October, November to me. So, okay, let's try this. How long would it take to do an OCP amendment and rezone for the balance of Area 5 to take this potential use out of the area that isn't going to be used for the hospital? We put it all in at one point and took it out instead of going the logical route. Is that a viable approach?
Sorry, through the chair, Councillor Parkinson, could you restate that question? I'm not sure I got all of it.
So if we go with a staff recommendation today, which has what I believe is a negative consequence of zoning all of Area 5 for potential hospital and treatment centers, which is not the intention, could we not then start a process to remove those things from the balance of Area 5 that isn't used for the hospital? And that would be something that probably, if it took a little bit longer, would not impede this project.
So through the chair, if I'm understanding correctly, then the only uses that would be permitted in Area 5 are the CRD care facility uses?
No. In Area 5, the part of Area 5 that was needed for the hospital would have the hospital zoning. The remainder of it would have the hospital zoning taken off it and be left with the existing zoning on it.
Understood. That's certainly through the chair, sorry, that's certainly something that if committee wants to recommend to council that staff look into the best mechanism for implementing, that's certainly something that we would take direction on.
Okay, thank you. Next I have Councillor Parkinson. Sorry, not Parkinson, Jansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I will be brief. So I'm waffling here because with new information, in the sense that, initially I was supportive of Councillor Parkinson's motion, but if I'm left with a decision that forces the building to go that much higher in area, if it's confined to Area 4, well, then to me, I think the lesser of two evils is to spread that out into Area 5. I love this discussion. Let me ask a question, Dennis. Does anything happen to the other density in Royal Bay South with these changes? Does it shift? Does it alter? Does it increase, decrease? Does it have any impact whatsoever that we might not be aware of at this moment?
Through the chair, if I understood Councillor Jansen's question, does it have any knock-on effects to any other areas outside of Area 5? Do I understand correctly?
Well, let me paint the picture for you. If we impact Area 5 and make some changes, does that mean some of the approved density shifts to some other sites and some other areas and what have you? Or is this discussion, the only impact is going to be on Area 5, that's it? I guess that's my question.
Through the chair, it would only impact Area 5.
Okay, and I made a note to myself here, I heard that we're in a rush, but I'm betting the time for a shovel in the ground is years from now. But again, I appreciate that information about the sale. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So just for clarity, there are two areas in the OCP, Area 4 and Area 5. Area 4 is for the hospital. I might have those reversed. 5 is for a different use. And what has been my understanding so far, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Carlson, but that the size of the one zone, Area 4, was not quite enough. So they needed an acre from the adjacent zone, Area 5. And that makes it more difficult for us to do the rezoning because the OCP sets those two areas out as different. So we're trying to find the best way to rezone it to allow the CRD facility to go ahead with the size of property that they need, but without the unintended consequences of changing what is expected to be there as identified in our OCP. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, it's correct. And if I could just, as a point of clarity, the sub-area plan regarding Area 5, and this is in the staff report, specifies that Area 5 continues to transition away from the core retail area towards opportunities for employment, service commercial, and institutional uses. So that is staff's position, is that this proposed use of extending the CRD care facility by 1 acre into Area 5 is still consistent with council's intent for Area 5. And therefore, there's no OCP amendment required in terms of its use.
Okay, thank you. I think that's very helpful. And next I had Councillor Parkinson. You had something more to say?
I think I'm good for now, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Then I had Councillor Baxter.
I just want to say, I cannot see what we're gaining for taking the risk that we may upset the sale arrangements here and lose the Huggiwick, or however that's pronounced, aspect of the building, which I think is very important, as well as the height issues, etc. If what was being proposed in this motion was going to make an important difference to the community, a positive difference, I'd be all for it. But I don't see that it makes any positive difference for the community, unless we're thinking that we may throw out this idea altogether, which I think would be terrible disservice to the community. I think that good job generators are few and far between, and this is one, and I think we need it to be as good as it can be. It makes our community better, and therefore I'll be opposing the motion and hoping that we go with the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Logan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually couldn't have put it any better than Councillor Baxter just did. I haven't been convinced that the staff recommendation is the wrong recommendation. I don't see what the risk is in incorporating that additional acre. And so, is it that this is the fear that the site could expand or the facility could expand to encompass all of Area 5? I haven't been convinced of that. And you know what? If there was a clinic that was a medical clinic that was located in Area 5, all the better for it. We need these facilities, and I think the risk, frankly, if we lost this facility, is greater than simply amending the zoning to include this use in Area 5. I'm very appreciative of the CRD for taking the leap and securing this property right now. That's a great sign. And I think we need to be an enabler, not a disabler. So I will be opposing the recommendation, and I will be supporting the staff recommendation, and I believe that's just the best way to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Logan. Mayor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question, and it can be through Steve Henderson, or it can be whoever can answer it. Is the pressure on the CRD side to close this deal, or is the pressure on the Gablecraft to close it by November 1st? Because it seems to me like we're all talking about the same thing. We all want that 5th acre, and we all want that zoning to occur there. But we don't want the rest, or for the majority of council, what I'm hearing is that we don't want the rest of Area 5 to have that zoning in place. And so how do we accomplish that in the most fast, effective, efficient way? But then we got thrown in with the twist that if we did an OCP amendment, it would take us past the time period that CRD wishes to close. So, Mr. Henderson, can you comment? Is there a risk to losing the project if Gablecraft agreed to extend the time period to, say, January, so that it accomplished what you wanted to accomplish?
I believe there is a risk on two sides. There's the Gablecraft risk, and there's also our partners who are applying for funding. We have architects employed, we have geoscientists employed, structural engineers employed. Everyone's designing. All the work and effort is being done on a 5-acre site. Proposals, applications for funding have all been based on the 5-acre site. If we were to move to a 4-acre site, we are, if we do not get the 4-acre site, and if it's not certain that, if we don't believe we're going to have the 5-acre site, then we have to relook at how we're going to progress, change our some of our designs. It changes the procurement, changes parking, how it's going to be put together, changes the height. It might change the type of materials we use to construct it, because all of a sudden the towers become closer together rather than far apart. So it changes the fire issue. So we, it has a very, not having some confidence that we're moving forward with a 5-acre site has implications to the CRD Island Health, who we're working with as partners on this project. And also at, I believe the landowners too are looking, they're progressing with significant investments in the property right now, doing the servicing, doing the regrading. They have all the material, all the machines. I think you've seen some very large excavators, Moxie trucks, and all of a sudden there wouldn't be certainty. They may have to demob, and I don't know if they're going to, when the ultimate decision then is made, and later on, I don't know if they're all that equipment is going to be there to provide the regrading that they're supposed to provide. As part of the acquisition, they're regrading the site. They're putting in the servicing, they're putting in driveways. So that's all going down between now and November. So there's a lot of money being spent on the site right now. Based on
Great, thank you. So I think it's important for the CRD to hear how supportive of this council is of the 5 acres. I don't think that's the issue here, and I hope as this meeting walks away tonight that that message is loud and clear to our partners, that this is just about us fixing, I think, Area 5, rather than saying, hey, we don't want to move forward at all. Saying that, Chair, I will not support the motion that's on the table. I would support the staff motion if the motion that's on the table does fail. But I would suggest that if the initial staff motion passes this evening, before it comes to council, I would strongly suggest that staff prepare in their report how they would expect to remove the rest of Zone 5, Area 5, excuse me, taking that the category out of the rest of Area 5, and giving council some options, at least from that standpoint. So thank you, Chair. I'm done.
Thank you.
Chair.
Sorry,
seems,
who's that?
sorry, it's Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you.
I think Mayor Martin has summed up the wishes of the group as well as my motion did. I'd be happy to withdraw my motion and let him put his into a motion to support the staff report with a mechanism to reduce the potential zoning on the other half of lot 5.
I think it would be a great kindness to your recording secretaries if we just allowed the motion to be defeated, even if you vote against it yourself, and then propose a new motion. It's just ever so much tidier.
Well, we got to be kind to our recording secretaries. Okay, I defer to your wisdom.
Okay, thank you. So I will call the question. Those opposed, please raise your virtual hands. Okay. And that is unanimously opposed. So thank you very much. And I don't think that you should feel the least bit bad about that, Councillor Parkinson. Your motion enabled a very worthy discussion oops, I just lowered the wrong hands. I'm sorry. I think that was Councillor Baxter. You had your hand up first, I believe, waiting to make a motion.
No, I was leaving it to the mayor.
Okay.
May I, Chair?
Yes, you may.
So I will move the staff recommendation and ask, in addition, request that staff provide options to council on how to remove. Sorry, I'm just trying to find the proper to remove the healthcare facility and treatment center or nursing home category off of the rest of Area 5. I don't know how many acres is Area 5. How many acres in total, staff?
Through the chair, it's a total of 2 acres, so there'd be 1 acre.
Oh, okay, so yeah. So yeah, so removing off the other acre.
Okay. Just going to check in with our recording secretary. Are we happy with the wording of the motion? You have it in hand?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. And we don't need a seconder because we're at committee. So I think we've talked this to death. So I will call the question. Any opposed? There are none opposed. So hopefully, Mr. Henderson, that will give you some comfort that it is not divided. We are very supportive of having this facility. It's just the slicing and dicing of how and where. Okay. Councillor Logan.
Move adjournment.
Thank you very much. Any opposed? We should talk a little bit about, we are coming on to our summer break, so we won't be having another committee of the whole, I don't believe, in July. Am I correct there? I'll just check with our
I believe we have one more, Councillor Day, July 5th.
Oh,
yeah,
July.
We'll have a July 5th committee, and that'll be the last committee.
Okay. I just thought it would be good to check in for any public who may be watching so that they know what's going on with us. Thank you. We are adjourned. We'll see you all next time.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Good night.